In this video, we're going to talk about restorative versus retributive just culture. For you as a leader, it's really important to understand the difference between these two. Retributive justice is something that has animated and driven most of just culture thinking that you may have come across so far. It's organized around three questions. What rule is broken? How bad was that breach? And what do the people involved in that breach now deserve? What should the consequences be? So in other words, it's organized around rules, violations, and consequences. Now, you might have seen elaborate schemes and systems of shades of culpability, where there is an innocent occasional error on the one hand that, should just receive compassion and perhaps a warning, a little slap on the wrist, versus negligence all the way through recklessness. Have they done it many times before? And so then they deserve further consequences or more consequences, all the way up to and including dismissal. It is as if we want to match the egregiousness of the act with the consequences that we append to them. That's what retributive justice is organized around. Now, you're probably not in the business as a leader of doing justice, other than in any sort of spontaneous and byproduct sense. Mostly, we're amateurs at this. We forget that there's thousands of years of humanity thinking around this stuff involved in doing retributive justice well. The first is that you need an independent judge to do that type of justice well. Do you have an independent judge? A judge who honestly has no stake in the outcome of the judgment? What if it is the supervisor, the manager? What if it is the hospital's risk manager or the HR director? What if it is you? Are you independent of the outcome of the judgment? Really? You're probably not. You have all kinds of stakes lined up. If you're not independent, you cannot be a fair judge. If you cannot be a fair judge, it is impossible to render justice in any way. And so, the second one is we need a jury of peers. We need people who actually understand the messy details of what it means to practice in the thing that went wrong and that you're now holding somebody accountable for. Now, who can do that? Can you put together a series of jury panel members who can adequately and honestly and fairly look at, oh yeah, no, that could have happened to us as well? Do you do that? It's not impossible, but it requires quite a bit of organization and a whole heap of resources to do this well. Because only a jury of peers can understand the messy details, the nuances of what it means to practice, how work actually gets done, not how it's written up in your 600 policies or so, because that's irrelevant. What matters is how it gets done in practice, in the night shift, when you are not there. And so, the third condition to make this sort of justice go well is a process of appeal, completely independent of everything that went before. New judge, no jury, right? New set of circumstances and evidence to be considered. Just recognize the amount of resources that you would need to do that well. Do you even have those processes? Probably not. Probably not in any way in which people consider to be fair. And so that sort of just culture has now become a verb. People say, I was just cultured. That means that they're probably fired on very unjust grounds. Justice ultimately can only be bargained. You cannot impose it. It wouldn't be just. And so this is where thinking about restorative justice actually gives you and empowers you with a strong, rigorous alternative to think about how to create justice in the wake of an incident in your organization. So let's talk about that. The first question to ask is, who is impacted by the incident? The second question is, what do they need? And the third question is, whose obligation is it to meet those needs? A restorative just culture is organized around impacts, needs, and obligations. Let's talk about impacts. When there's an incident in a ward, who is impacted? The service user, the patient, the caregiver, colleagues, family, you, the reputation of your facility. All of these people are somehow impacted by the event. These impacts create needs, a whole landscape of needs. The patient may need further care. The caregiver may need a shoulder to cry on. Whatever it may be, they have needs. These needs create obligations. Obligations on other people in the system, perhaps including you, to start meeting those needs. This is the conversation and the rigorous way to organize that conversation in the wake of bad news, in the wake of an incident. But you come back and say, there needs to be some accountability. We need to be able to hold people accountable for their performance, don't we? That's what I'm a leader for. I believe in accountability. Of course you do. Of course you do. Otherwise you wouldn't have the job you do. Otherwise you wouldn't have been given the role that you have. But let's stop and think briefly about what accountability means. An account can be something that you settle and pay, or it can be something that you share and tell. Think about that. As a leader, what would you rather like? And what type of leader do you want to be? Do you want the type of leader who settles account? Who wants to get paid for what they are due because of their performance, basically are in debt to you now? And that's why you need to fire them or put them on administrative leave or have other consequences? Or are you the type of leader who has the compassion and the willingness and the ability to sit down and say, I can listen. I want to listen and I want to learn. Because your account is incredibly valuable to me and to the organization and to colleagues and to all of our servers, users, and patients going forward. We want to learn from your account and get wiser because of it. Are you that type of leader? Accountability doesn't need to equate with blaming. It can be about learning, about using the account for the best of the organization, for quality improvement and for safety improvement. In this too, remember, don't ask who is responsible. Ask what is responsible in these accounts. Remember, incidents impact people wide and far. Impacts create needs. Needs create obligations that you can help meet as a leader. And this way, you hold people accountable in a forward-looking sense. Rather than backward-looking and blaming, the question becomes, what do we do now? What do we do to help set each other up for success going forward? And how do we hold each other accountable for our ability to do that? That is real leadership. Leadership and restorative justice are hand in glove. You can do this. You can be rigorous about it. You can really be very strong in it and be a leader that I think you may have always aspired to be.